It's called the pellet grill boom. And for most pellet grills, it happens when you start with the lid closed. Now, here's the thing. I own two MacStar Generals, and Mac actually tells you to start with the lid closed. But if you're running a Z grill, their instructions explicitly say to start with the lid open. Same category of grill, completely opposite instructions. That right there tells you everything you need to know about today's episode. These mistakes aren't always black and white, and the details matter. Welcome to the Backyard SmokeMaster Barbecue Podcast. I'm Kenyatta Robinson, and today we're covering 25 costly pellet grill mistakes you might not even realize you're making. Mistakes that waste pellets, kill your fire, cause grease fires, and ruin expensive meat. I'm not just listing them, I'm giving you the context and nuance that a generic blog post can't. So grab a pen because we're about to save you time, money, and a whole lot of frustration. We're going to get into it in 30 seconds. All right, 25 pellet grill mistakes you should not make. Let me take a moment to invite everyone who is tuning in live to jump into the comments. Don't hesitate, don't be shy. You can ask a question about today's topic, pellet grills, or you can ask a question about anything barbecue related. I will try to answer it, and if I can't, I know that there is somebody that's also watching live that will be in the comments who will be able to point us in the right direction. As I say every week, the comments, the energy, the feedback that I get from the live crew that's tuning in is really the engine that drives this podcast. And I appreciate you all. And I'm going to shout some of you guys out right now. All right, we got Dan's Diamond Detailing. He says this will be fun. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think even if you don't already have a pellet grill, there are going to be some tips in here that you can apply to barbecue in general. So I know we'll be sharing a lot of good, valuable information for you barbecue enthusiasts who are tuning in. Greetings to Backyard SmokeMaster Society brother Mike. Good to see you. We got Kettle Mania back again. He says, I don't have a pellet grill, so this should be interesting. I think you will be able to relate to everything that we talk about. Correctional Officer for Lockdown, also a society brother, says, good evening, everyone. Always good to see you. And then we've got the man that has a wealth of information. Real Meat Stick is here. He says, I thought pellet grills are self-cleaning when the hopper bursts into flames. So pick up on all that dripping sarcasm there. And then we've got Society Brother Jeff says, greetings. Absolutely. Let's see. Good to see you all. Let's see. Let me throw up another one. We got Real Meat Stick saying, I have a few pellet cookers. They are great. Set it and get some sleep or go to work. So that is actually the general the general thought when it comes to pellet grills is that they are the true set it and forget it machines of the barbecue world. I'm going to give you guys some information that it may not necessarily be as set it and forget it as you think. There are some definitely some things that you should be paying attention to make sure that you don't eventually run into any problems. The smiling family, good to see you again. Good evening, everyone. And I'll do one more. Real Meat Stick says, I found both RecTech and Camp Chef to make affordable pellet cookers with great PID controllers. There are a ton of really good pellet grill manufacturers out there, and definitely RecTech and Camp Chef absolutely have very solid, very strong reputations indeed. Okay, now before we dive in, I want to hear from you. So drop a comment right now and tell me, what's the most expensive pellet grill mistake you've ever made, and how much did it cost you? So this could be money, could be a ruined cook, it could be both. So I'll be reading your answers throughout the show, as well as getting more into your comments and feedback. Also, let me take a moment to announce that the Backyard SmokeMaster Barbecue podcast has its first official sponsor, Smokin' Pecan. So it's very timely that Smokin' Pecan, they make pellets that are made from 100% the pecan shell. You get absolute great smoke flavor, very timely that they have come on board as our very first official sponsor. Yeah. So I'd like to thank the team over at Smokin' Pecan. It's a family-run business out of my mom's hometown, Mansfield, Louisiana. So thank you to Newell, Brianna, and Chelsea. I definitely appreciate your support. And I will tell you guys more about Smokin' Pecan a little bit later in the show. Oh, that deserved a second applause. Okay, so actually, also, before we get into it, I also want to give credit to the Smoked Barbecue Source article that I basically took this information from, and they can be found. Actually, let me see if I can get their the article up on the screen here. So there it is, and let's see, where is the button that I'm looking for? Okay, here we go. Here it is, sharing the screen here. So you can find this article if you want to read along. It's at www.smokedbbqsource.com/pellet grill mistakes. So we're going to get into exactly why pellet grills fail. And, it's usually the operator and not the machine. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about the set it and forget it myth. Again, these machines need attention. So, there again, that's where you can find that article. This is what we're covering. Let's get into it. So I'm not going to go through these in the same order that they have it laid out in the magazine. Instead, I thought it would be much more useful to us if I categorize these mistakes that people typically make into certain buckets. So we're going to start with a bucket that I'm calling the fuel and storage mistakes. So starting with mistake number 20, first off, pellet bags are not airtight. So actually, the mistake is that we shouldn't store your pellets in the original bag. And one of the reasons is that pellet bags are not airtight. Humidity can degrade the pellets over time, causing soft and dull pellets that won't burn cleanly. The solution to this is to store your pellets in airtight containers and try and store them off the ground if you can. And I think I have a couple of photos to show you guys what I use. So you guys may have seen these before. So these are the Kingsford containers that they sell. Really, I think the intent was to store like your charcoal briquettes. I have found these to be really good. Actually, let me go back. These are really good for storing pellets, and these are really airtight. I've been using these for a very, very long time. And a word of caution, recently I saw that they kind of like the newer versions kind of have a different look, kind of more of a clear, see-through container. I bought a couple of those and I saw them at Sam's Club, and you may have seen them at like the local hardware store. I have found that actually the newer ones aren't really airtight. When it rained, liquid water got inside of my container. So if you can, try and find the original ones if you can. And also throw it up in the comments, if you guys have things, certain containers or things that you recommend for keeping your pellets, nice and secure. Now, getting back to the discussion here about pellets and different pellet grill brands. So we got a few people, giving a lot of praise, for instance, to RecTech. Jeff says I have a Camp Chef and I've been really happy with it. 5 years and going strong. That's exactly what you want to hear and see. Mike gives a thumbs up to our sponsor, Smoking Pecan. Real Meat Stick says, I added cheap pellets improperly sized into my hopper. I had to shop vac 40 pounds of pellets out and clean up the auger. And we're going to get to that. That actually is one of the mistake areas, is when we're dealing with like the really like the small pellets that sometimes you find towards the bottom of the bag. We're going to get into how you need to pay attention. Don't just take the bag and just dump it into the hopper and think that you're all good. The fine dust particles can cause problems. I think also what Real Meat Stick is alluding to is sometimes there can be pellets that are sometimes a little bit too long. They might cause some issues as well. So the brand, the quality of the pellets can definitely make a difference. I think Kettle Mania here is referring here to Smoking Pecan. Again, this is, obviously I want sponsors for the podcast, and in a perfect world, I mean, I only have one sponsor so far, but let's pretend I had 5 or 6 different sponsors. In a perfect world, I would have personal direct experience with all of them. I know that probably won't necessarily be the case because I'll be reaching out to, other brands related to barbecue. So very likely that I might eventually get a sponsor that I don't have direct experience with, although I will try my best to be able to endorse and speak to you guys from my own personal experience. I can say that I do have experience with Smoking Pecan. I've made a video comparing them to Traeger, and I was totally amazed, blown away. I really saw like a different smoke quality in using the Smoking Pecan pellets, knowing that they're made, from the pecan shells, no fillers going on. So it's not like the situations where sometimes you buy pellets, the outside may say cherry, but then, truth be told, unbeknownst to you, it could be like really made from alder or made from oak with a cherry filler. Some of these brands do that kind of thing. I can say from Smoking Pecan, it's 100% made from the pecan shells. So you don't have to question whether or not you're getting the smoke flavor that you intended to. But more on that later. But yeah, big shout out. I love it. Correctional officer says, congratulations for Smoking Pecan. Appreciate you guys. Absolutely. Kettlemania asks, does Smoking Pecan have wood chunks? So check out their website, smokingpecan.com. I think on the bottom of the screen here, you'll see where I'm sharing their address. If you go, actually, if you put in backyardsmokemaster.com/pecan, it should come up on the scroll at the bottom of the screen. That will take you in. If you're a first time customer, you can save 10% off your first order. Now, to the best of my knowledge, I don't believe they sell like pecan wood chunks. I think they're strictly selling pecans or pecan flavored pellets that are made from the shells. I could be wrong. I'll look into that, but I don't think they're selling pecan wood chunks. But who knows? Maybe that'll be something they do in the future. Real Meat Stick says smoking pecan makes a great product, high smoke output and smooth flavor profile. And that's it exactly right there. Um, couldn't have said it any better myself. Jeff concurs that smoking pecan pellets are great. Okay, so let's keep it moving here. Getting into this, mistake number 19. Actually, I just alluded to this. Dumping pellet dust straight into the hopper is a mistake. So, like I said, when you get your bag of when you get your bag of pellets, don't just dump them directly into the hopper. Again, the sawdust and small pellet fragments at the bottom of the bag, they're not going to burn the same way as whole pellets do. So that is something you want to avoid. And also, doing that, be aware that, sawdust can pack tightly and that can restrict the airflow inside of your cooker and that can create excessive ash. That's something else, when we're using our pellet grills, you always want to avoid a situation, hopefully, where you have too much ash creation. Back to smoking pecan. From my own experience, I know that using their pellets don't create the same amount of ash as other pellets that are made from hardwoods. Just another plus. So if you haven't tried smoking pecan, give it a shot. Use my code, my link there, and you can save 10% on your first order. Let's keep going. Okay. The solution, when you get your bag, what you want to do is scoop from the top of the bag, shake the bags outside before opening, and then when you do start to put the pellets into your hopper, periodically vacuum out the hopper dust. You don't want the hopper dust to sit and stay inside of your pellet hopper. And here's an example. This is one that I just bought. This is like a handheld kind of a shop vac. DeWalt makes this, and what I really like about it is that I don't have to deal with or concern myself with plugging it in. Like the same lithium ion batteries that they use to power some of their tools. It works with this shop vac. So this is one that I picked up, really comes in handy, makes it really easy to vacuum out the dust or clean out, my other cookers, getting the small particles out of there, once everything has completely cooled down. They also have a smaller one, an even smaller one, but I like the size of this one. So just putting that out there if you need some ideas of the type of shop vac that you could get, or handheld vacuum. All right, mistake number 18: letting the hopper run completely dry during long cooks. Okay, so again, set it and forget it doesn't mean just sitting back, letting that smoker go, that pellet grill go, and ignoring the hopper for 12 hours. Letting it flame out that's one of the things you absolutely want to avoid. So flameouts can happen from empty hoppers or tunneling where pellets cling to the sides. And we've all kind of seen that. You open up the hopper and you see kind of looks like a funnel, like a triangle almost. There's pellets that are off on the sides still, but then at the very bottom, it's getting very shallow. The pellets that are being pulled down from the center into the auger. So every now and then, get out there and stir the pellets in your hopper every few hours to make sure that they're not just, kind of sticking on the sides there. We want them to go down, so they can be pulled into the auger, which then feeds them into the fire pot. So again, if you do have a flame out or a situation where you need to restart mid cook, that normally is going to require you to do a full shutdown, and it can potentially really set you back an hour, maybe 2 hours, or it could potentially ruin the entire cook. So the solution, like I just said, check the pellet levels, stir the hopper every few hours, make sure that you're getting good, the pellets are actually easily being fed into the auger. All right, Real Meat Stick says, I can get hold on, let me make that a little bigger. Wait a minute. There we go, something like that. All right, he says, I can get my Cook Shack pellet fired pizza oven to 1,000 degrees. This cooks a pizza in 90 seconds. All right. Well, that's like a whole different category. Um, Pizza ovens or those dedicated pizza cookers. I recall, us talking about them on a podcast a little ways back. And I remember thinking to myself, I've looked at the dedicated pizza cookers, outdoor cookers, haven't pulled the trigger. I actually would see myself using it more for doing things like a steak or something like that that can, really taking advantage of that high heat, So there are definitely um an interesting cooking choice for sure. Okay, Kettle Mania asks, do pecan shell pellets smell like pecan chunks? Huh. So I would say, yeah, you're gonna get some of that same smell, but I don't want to oversell this. You know, Pellets are still pellets. So while I can, definitely say that, for instance, smoking pecans pellets are going to generate, more smoke, give you more of a smoke flavor than a lot of the other pellet brands that are out there and the pellets that they produce. It's still not going to be an exact match, I would say, for smoking with pecan chunks, like, in your charcoal cooker and adding pecan chunks, or cooking with an offset smoker. It's just, you're dealing with more dense wood in those situations, and I think you're still going to get a more intense smoke flavor, from wood chunks, wood splits than you're going to get from pellets. I mean, that's just the nature. I don't really know all the science about it, but I'm pretty comfortable in saying that. So I think if you get a pellet grill, do yourself a favor, try the smoking pecan pellets to get more of an intense smoke flavor than you're going to get from other brands. But, don't go into it thinking that you're going to be able to replicate the type of smoke flavor that you're going to get when you're cooking with charcoal and wood chunks. They're just a different category. All right. Real Meat Stick says low and slow true southern barbecue can be done on a pellet smoker using smoking pecan. The pellets are made from pecan shells. And I have a tip. I do have a tip that we're going to get to a little bit later that will help, and not just with smoking pecan, but with any pellet cook that you do. I have a tip that will help you maximize the smoke flavor that you can get from your pellet grill. And Real Meat Stick says, when opening a bag of pellets, I have learned to dump them through a colander. That's a good idea, to eliminate the pellet dust and get only the pellets. So that's a great tip. And again, that's what we're talking about, trying to avoid dumping in all that dust, the very small particles and the dust that's contained in the bag. That's what we want to keep as much as we can out of the hopper. And old pellets will look there. Let's see. Okay, old pellets, when you look at them, I think will have a sheen and shine, or they won't have a sheen and shine. They look dull. This will affect the amount of time your pellets will burn. So as usual, Real Meat Stick comes with a whole lot of language, and he's really helping to supplement my show. And he agrees with me, and he says that I'm correct when comparing hardwood to pellets regarding those differences. Yeah. So again, go in with your eyes open and don't fool yourself into thinking you're going to be able to completely replicate the smoke flavor from hardwood, by using pellets. Different, different categories. All right, let's keep moving on. So we're still talking about fuel and storage mistakes. And mistake number 16 is using stove pellets by mistake. So when you go to the hardware store, they're going to have the pellets that are designated for cooking with food, but then, there are also pellets that you can buy that are made to help keep your house warm. You absolutely don't want to confuse them and use those types of pellets in your pellet cooker. So heating pellets are made for warmth, not food. They often contain softwoods, bark, or chemical binding agents that burn dirty. So again, make sure you're only using pellets labeled for grills and smokers. Real Meat Stick says, I don't know why these are coming out so small, but Real Meat Stick says, the hybrid pellet cookers that combine pellets and a wood chunk burn box can overcome that issue. Then you get the best of both worlds. I believe Camp Chef, if I'm not mistaken, I know that I think they have a a pellet grill, I believe, that has some type of a burn box as well, where you can utilize uh, where you can utilize wood chunks, and I think it may even burn charcoal briquettes. I could be wrong about that, but yeah, most of the time, I'm not really a big fan of like sometimes you see these hybrid cookers that talk about being able to, cook with gas and charcoal and pellets as well. Because a lot of times, you know, they don't necessarily do any of them particularly well, right? Um, So I'm really more of a fan of getting a dedicated pellet grill, but I do think there are some cases where, like what Real Meat Stick talks about, where they have like you know, a wood chunk burn box, that are specifically made with the intent of allowing you to use chunks, to supplement the smoke flavor that you get from your pellets. All right. Dan's Diamond says, I've never tried pellets, but it sounds kind of fun. But overall, that level of maintenance, might as well just use the Weber Smoky Mountain or that smoker that you used in the past video. Okay, so he might be. I just put out a video that just came out yesterday where I'm utilizing the smoke slinger, doing a direct heat cook with ribs. So maybe that's what he's referring to. So there, and this is why I'm a big proponent. If you can, and if your significant other will allow you to have multiple cookers in your yard, different styles, different use cases, different situations. So I'm very happy that I have pellet grills, charcoal based cookers, offset smokers. I mean, I've got a lot of grills and smokers, but I feel like I have a good use case for each one that I purchase. And I think that there are some great use cases for pellet grills. And while I'm telling you about some things that you need to be aware of and cognizant of to make sure that you're getting the most out of your pellet grill, I don't want you to think that, that they're overly complicated and overly difficult to use. There are some situations where having a pellet grill can really come in handy and be a lot easier of a cook than, for instance, doing something on a Weber Smoky Mountain. All of these cookers are great, they're fantastic, and they definitely have pluses and minuses. So being aware of what those pros and cons are, you can add them to your collection and really take advantage of it and have great options. That's what I'm a big fan of is giving yourself fantastic options. Real Meat Stick says, pellets made to warm the house or add to the animal barn are not food grade. That's right. However, you can add food grade pellets to your home pellet stove and make the neighborhood smell like barbecue in the winter. Wow. So I never thought about that. Like I'm fully aware, don't use, warming pellets in your pellet grill cookers, but Real Meat Stick is saying that it's okay to use your food grade pellets in, a pellet warming oven. That it's okay to in that situation. So that's interesting. Um, yeah, it makes the neighborhood smell like barbecue in the winter. So I'm curious because I've never bought the warm, the keep your house warm type of pellets. Are they similar in cost? Like there's one category, do the food grade pellets, are they significantly more or less than the other type of pellets? So let me know in the comments. Okay, let's move on to mistake number 15 based on Smoked Barbecue's list. So number 15 is cooking in the wind and cold without shelter. I feel like this is one that can apply to any type of cooker that you have, but specifically, pellet grills are extremely sensitive to wind, especially in cold weather. Gusts strip the heat faster than the controller can compensate, and it forces the grill to drop more pellets just to stay lit. This can lead to wild temperature swings, flameouts, or unexpectedly running out of pellets mid cook. The solution, and this is one that I think can apply, and a lot of us are still dealing with extreme cold right now. Use a windbreak or an insulation blanket, or turn the exhaust away from the wind. So these are all things to be cognizant of. All right, let's move now. Let's see, we're going to move into the next category, the next bucket. But before we do, if you haven't already, please like this podcast while you're watching. Subscribe if you aren't already subscribed. Make sure that you don't miss out. Keep on commenting. I love the engagement, the energy that we're getting in the comments is fantastic. And then also over on the YouTube on the page that you're watching this video on, take a moment to answer the poll question that I put over there. And let me see if I can take a look at that poll question, which was, how often do you clean your pellet grill? Oh, and I see so far, it doesn't look like anyone has answered that question. So if you can, go ahead and answer that question, and then I will talk about the results at the end of the show. All right, let's see. Looking here, seeing if there's any questions. Okay, the smiling family. Hold on. Hopefully this will come up. I'm getting a spinning wheel. I'm trying to get this oh, there it is. Okay, hold on. We're having a little bit of a technical issue. There we go. So we got this comment here from Smiling Family related to the Lone Star Grill's El Fuego Trio. It accepts any combination of pellets, charcoal, and wood splits. The design is pretty great. Okay, so I'm not familiar with that one. I wonder how long has that one been out. But that's good information. The LSG, I have one of their offset smokers, and they do make great cookers. And Smiling Family says, I find the Weber Smoky Mountain and Summit Kamado to be set it and forget it. Also, it's just that the set it part takes a bit more effort. And, I think that would be the exact way to describe, the difference between using a pellet grill and using a charcoal based cooker like the Summit Kamado and the Smoky Mountain, or maybe a drum smoker. Once you get the temperature locked in on those charcoal based cookers, they do an excellent job of just running themselves. Set it and forget it. But from time to time, you're going to have to go out there and maybe make some adjustments, at the vents to make sure you're keeping that temperature, where you want it. So that's in those situations, that's where you end up with, needing to do a little bit more than what you might have to do when you're using a pellet grill. Let's see. Jeff says, good one. Cold weather cooking, a thermal wrap for the cooking chamber helps a lot to maintain temperatures in the cold. Okay, Real Meat Stick answering my question is as to whether or not the heating pellets are similar to the food grade pellets. He says they're not similar in cost. Premium heating pellets are $6 for a 40-pound bag. Premium cooking pellets are significantly higher, yeah, for a a 20-pound bag. So, okay, so yeah, when you were talking about using the food grade pellets in your heating oven and, giving the whole neighborhood that barbecue smell, I don't know. That type of a price difference, I think I would stick to the heating pellets, and use them, for that situation. I think that's what I would probably do. But I digress. Okay. Okay. So that's interesting. Dan letting me know that poll ended before the show started. All right, there's always something going on, you know, with these platforms. So, not quite sure what happened there. All right, well, never mind. Um, Don't worry about it. That's my bad for not being aware that the poll already ended. I'll have to look into what happened there. But moving on, Dan's Diamond says if you are running briquettes in the Weber Smoky Mountain, you will need to move it a little more often than if you're using lump. Way less ash from lump. I think yeah, and I think that that's kind of a universally known fact, that lump charcoal, when you're burning it, is going to give you less ash than the briquettes. Okay, so now we're going to talk about this bucket, what I'm calling the fire management mistakes. And I think a lot of these can also be universally applied. So basically, the theme here is respect the fire. It's what makes everything work. So, mistake number 25, letting ash build up outside the fire pot. So, that's something we don't want to do. Many owners only vacuum when the fire pot I'm sorry, let me start over. Many owners vacuum only the fire pot and they ignore the rest of the grill floor. So we don't want to do that. Um, Make sure you're vacuuming out the entire cooking chamber. And I think that's going to be reiterated here in a second. So keep in mind that ash circulates throughout the cook chamber and settles everywhere. These pellet grills, it's like a fan that's blowing air, and it's going to blow that ash all over the place. Over time, hidden ash buildup insulates heat, stresses the internal metal, and it can throw off the temperature readings. And this can also increase the risk of fire and ending up with warped components. So the solution, like I said, clean the entire cooking chamber after every 2 or 3 cooks and not just the fire pot. Let's see. Saw a few more comments come in. Okay. Tim Washington, let me make that a little bigger. Thank you for tuning in and leaving a comment. He says, I do not have a pellet smoker. I just use the pecan shell pellets in my range inside the house till I can get me a new char griller 980 if it's out of service. All right. All right. Well, I think, yeah, these pecan shell pellets, smoking pecan pellets can come in handy in many different ways. Smiling Family, thank you. Says this is a super great live podcast, even with the minor technical difficulties and all. Well, I appreciate that. We're live. A lot of podcasts, they record the podcast and then they go back and edit it and try and make it, all pristine and perfect. But I like doing it live because I like interacting with 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 you guys live, in a real time situation. And it's gonna come with some hiccups. I mean, and that's kind of how you know that this thing is live. Tim says, I smoke my meat in my range in the house because I have an excellent exhaust system. Laugh out loud. Okay, I'm getting a better picture of what you're saying. So that's really interesting that you're able to smoke meat inside the house, with your regular oven, your regular cooking equipment inside the house. All I'm going to say is, hey, that's working for Tim. I'm not going to suggest that, the other guys watching that you try that at home because I don't know how that's going to turn out. But it works for Tim. And if you have some questions about how that could work, direct them to Tim. All right, but that's cool. That's cool that works out for you. Real Meat Stick says, yeah, ash restricts airflow. It causes weak ignition, flameouts, and wild temperature swings. Yeah, that just reiterates the point that we definitely don't want to have ash buildup inside of the cooking chamber. So make sure that that's something that you're paying attention to and cleaning out on a regular basis. Mistake number 23, ignoring thick white smoke during a cook. And I think this is kind of universal. Billowy white smoke is not a good smoke. It signals incomplete combustion caused by poor airflow, bad pellets, or a smothered fire. Deposits creosote on food and leaves a bitter chemical taste. You absolutely don't want that impacting the flavor of our food. You want light, especially with a pellet smoker or pellet grill. This is what they're really, this is what they're really good at, and what makes them, when we talk about the amount of effort that you put in to get that holy grail of smoke, you know, light, barely visible smoke. You have to work a lot harder, at least with an offset smoker. You definitely have to work a lot harder to get that really invisible, barely visible looking smoke. Probably have to work a little bit less hard on a Weber Smoky Mountain and even less on a Summit Kamado once you get it dialed in. But this is really one of the big advantages of pellet grills. This is what they're good at. If you have good pellets, you're going to get that barely visible smoke when it's really turning. So, again, we want light, barely visible smoke, not clouds pouring out of the stack. Our solution here, again, check the pellet quality, the airflow, and the fire pot condition. Let's see. Jeff saying to Tim, I have to say, I've thought of using the smoke tube in my oven, but don't have the guts. Yeah, and that's something a lot of people, will do to um, supplement, the smoke that they get in their pellet grill, because historically pellet grills, kind of the reputation is that they don't produce as much smoke flavor as other types of cookers. Again, I say a solution is to use smoking pecan, and then also, like what Jeff is suggesting, you can buy those smoke tubes and put pellets inside of the tube, and then put that inside of your cooking chamber to get more smoke going inside of the cooking chamber. But Jeff is saying he's thought about putting that smoke tube in his oven, but doesn't have the guts. I don't blame you. I wouldn't do that either. And I'm kind of wondering if something went terribly wrong, I wonder what the insurance company would say about that if they knew that you put that smoke tube in the oven. I don't know, but I'm not going to go too far down that rabbit hole. Tim says, I've got some welding gloves and I'm moving on to charcoal and pellets. I use welding gloves when I'm when I'm cooking with my offset smoker. And they're great. They're great for, protecting your hands from the heat. And again, Tim says, his exhaust system. So he's got a great exhaust system going on. He says it shoots the smoke outside. So Tim, you're the envy, I think, of everyone watching, and we're all kind of like, can I do that too? But again, I think Tim has got a nice setup situation going on there. Okay, number 17. Forgetting to prime the auger after running dry. And, this is something I have to admit that I really wasn't familiar with, and I'll get to the reason why. But this is a situation where After the hopper empties, the auger is going to be full of air, not fuel. So, refilling and hitting start without priming can lead to ignition failures. And this typically takes 10 minutes for new pellets to reach the fire pot. The solution is to always use the manual prime function before starting the igniter. So on grills like the Traeger, it actually has a detailed prime auger function in the controller menu. And then doing, this got me kind of wondering, well, what's the process for Mac? And then I learned that Mac doesn't, they don't have a process for doing that, because that's what I've been using for years. So that's something that I don't have to necessarily encounter. But really, it's important. I guess the main takeaway is if you get a pellet smoker. I know a lot of us guys, we're like, I don't have time to be reading the manual, but I think in this case, take some time to make sure you pick up on some of those key instruction points related to your particular pellet grill, as they can be very important. I'm kind of chuckling to myself. Mike says, sounds like Tim is single. Yeah, I am kind of betting. I kind of would take that bet too. I think Tim is probably single. I think if he's got a wife in the house, she would probably put the kibosh, you know, on that smoky meat indoors. But again, you're the envy. You're the envy, man. You're living your best life. Absolutely. All right. Mistake number 13, and this is a general one: opening the lid just to check. So every lid opening dumps heat and smoke from the cook chamber. The controller in a pellet grill is going to respond to that by feeding more pellets to help it recover. Frequent openings are going to end up stretching, making your cook times longer. It's going to increase pellet usage, and it's going to destabilize the temperatures inside of your cooker. So the solution here: trust your probes and your timers. Only open that lid when you're moving meat around or spritzing, wrapping, or removing food. So this is a universal rule. Try not to open the lid just for the sake of peeking at it, you know, and just to be checking, just with no reason, no true purpose in mind. All right. Okay. Mistake number 7 is ignoring grinding or squealing auger noises. So grinding often means that there's a jam or a foreign object in the auger. Squealing points to motor stress or lack of lubrication. Ignoring those noises usually leaves you with a failed cook, and even worse, potentially a really potential expensive motor replacement. So the solution here is to address any unusual sounds that you're hearing immediately. Oh my goodness. I'm looking here. Tim says he is married. Wow. Well, you got a good one there, Tim. You got a good one. Does she know that that's what you're actually doing? This has been like a great, kind of like a side topic, but definitely fascinating. Real Meat Stick says, yeah, every lid lift drops temps. It triggers the controller to dump extra pellets, and then when the lid closes, can overshoot. And that's something I think, like I said, that can happen, even if you're cooking like on a charcoal based cooker. A lot of times when you have that lid open, extra oxygen gets in there, you close the lid, and then you see spikes in temperature where you see the temps go up if you're, opening that lid too much without having a true purpose. Okay, let's see. Mistake number 3. Definitely avoid the temptation to just unplug the grill when you're finished cooking instead of using the shutdown function. Let's see. Cutting the power immediately leaves an active fire in the pot with no airflow control. And in extreme cases, the heat can travel backward through the auger toward the hopper. Okay, I got a little out of order there, but that's what I just talked about. And then the shutdown cycle exists to burn off the remaining fuel and cool components safely. So the solution here is to make sure you always use the proper shutdown cycle. And let's see. Okay, this is actually going to be Nate, spoiler alert. This is like one of the big tips that I was going to get to, but we're going to go ahead and read it now because Nate nailed it. He says use the lowest temperature setting that your pellet smoker has, usually 160 to 180 degrees. Smoke the meat at this setting for as long as you can, 4+ hours, and then finish the cooking with a higher temp. So yeah, this is one of the tips that I was going to get to help enhance the smoke flavor of your meat. Give yourself a deeper smoke ring, is you don't necessarily want to just start off like if your recipe you're following and it says, smoke at 250 degrees for 2 hours. With a pellet grill, you don't necessarily want to just start right at 250. Take advantage of that built-in smoke function on your pellet grill and be patient and let the meat cook at that smoke setting. Like Tim said, it's going to be between 160 and 180. That's going to give you more of a smoke flavor. Great tip. Real Meat Stick says, opening the lid too soon or killing power without a shutdown cycle can leave raw pellets piling up in the fire pot. Always run the shutdown cycle so the pellets burn out safely. Yes, that is absolutely correct. Correctional officer says, I'm looking at the RecTech Bullseye. It looks like a model for wings. If I'm not mistaken, the Bullseye, I think that's the one that kind of looks like a kettle, right? It's kind of shaped like a kettle. I think maybe that's why correctional officer is saying it looks like a good model for wings. So the key, though, in one of the, especially years ago, one of the often talked about downsides of a pellet grill was that they wouldn't get hot enough. They were great for smoking, like, that 160, 180 smoke setting, and then also holding temps between like 225, 275. They were excellent for doing that, but they were known for not really getting like up over 350 degrees, not able to get to 400 degrees. So I think this has changed and improved a lot over the last few years. Um, Even like pellet grills like the ones that I bought from Mac from years ago, they have these retrofit kits you can buy that now allow the Mac to get up over 400 degrees. A lot of the pellet grills you get now also tout the fact that they can get hot, high temperatures. So that if your goal is to use a pellet grill to do things like wings, you want to make sure that it can get up over 350, that it can get 375, 400 degrees Because as we've talked about a lot with poultry, we don't want the skin on our wings to be too, rubbery. Because if they are, it's going to be chewy, and that's not a good bite. We want bite through skin, and in order to render that skin, you're gonna need to be able to do the wings, finish them off at a high temperature. So that's something to keep in mind. All right, Tim says, yes, she knows exactly what I'm doing. I purchased that convection oven and I'm going to use it. Absolutely, absolutely use that oven. Keep doing what you're doing. It's working. It's working for you. We're all just amazed and curious. We got questions. Nate hit it on the head. That's the science of low and slow barbecue. Once that meat hits that 150 to 160 internal temperature, then it's ready for higher temps to finish the cook. Right, because once it's in that 150, 160, maybe even as much as 165 range, it's taking on all the smoke flavor that it can take. It's not going to take on any more smoke flavor. So again, what Nate talked about was starting off your pellet grill using that smoke function, smoking that meat 160 to 180. The pellet grill's gonna produce more smoke, and that's going to be absorbed into your meat, give you a better, more intense smoke flavor when you cook at those low temperatures. And then, as Real Meat Stick says, once that internal temp hits 150 to 160, then you can crank up the temperature and finish off the cook at a higher temperature. So these are great tips to take away with you as you continue your barbecue journey. The Carpenter says, any opinions on the Weber Searwood pellet grill as compared to other brands? So I don't have direct cooking experience with the Weber Searwood, but I have seen some reviews and they've all been favorable. So the Weber pellet journey has been pretty interesting. I think they started off with the Weber Smoke Fire. I think that was the name of it, the original model. It kind of got some bad press. I think something about the way the pellets were being fed into the auger wasn't effective. And then I think there were some YouTubers, some popular YouTubers that were making videos talking about grease fires and that type of thing with that Weber Smoke Fire. And it was also, I think, out of all of their pellet grills, I think it was the most expensive as well when it first came out. So now they've got the Weber Searwood, which doesn't cost as much as the Smoke Fire, but I think that they have worked out those issues. It would not, at least I'm not seeing or hearing reports of those same types of issues. And I think it's very highly regarded. So I would say, the Weber Searwood, when you're comparing it to other brands in that same cost category, I think it's just fine. I can't say whether or not it's, considered better than maybe a Camp Chef that's priced similarly, but I don't think it would be any worse. Um, and I think Weber has worked out the issue. So I think if the Searwood has, caught your eye, caught your attention, then I think you would be, very safe picking up a Weber Searwood. And then, of course, if anyone in the comments has any direct experience in the chat with the Weber Searwood, please, chime in if you do have some direct experience. And Tim is just again, I'm building on that point about using the smoke function on the pellet grill. Says after 2 hours, he would typically change from the smoke setting. Oh, he would say he would change from smoke charcoal maybe to finish it off. It's kind of depending on what you're cooking, but that is also another strategy you could take. Smoke, you know, use that smoke function on your pellet grill for a few hours, maximize the smoke flavor, and then you could finish it off on a charcoal cooker. Or maybe if you're cooking with like a hybrid grill, utilize the charcoal function. Lots of different options and ways to go about that to maximize um, smoke flavor, and then also try and get like the best. I'm thinking achieve the best bite through situation, like if you're doing poultry. All right, continuing with fire management mistakes. This one, and this is basically, we just talked about all of this, setting the temperature too high too early. So pellet grills burn very efficiently, like we talked about, 250 to 275. At that point, the smoke production begins to drop sharply, and this is why many people complain that pellet grill foods lack smoky flavor. And if you start hot, it's going to rob the meat of smoke flavor before it has time to absorb it. And here we go. What the solution would be, start low. Here I'm saying 180 to 225, but if you've got a smoke function on your pellet grill, like Tim has talked about, 160 to 180. Just use that smoker temperature, whatever that smoke temperature is on your pellet grill, and it's going to give you the lowest and the most smoke that it can produce. So use that early in the cook to build flavor, get a deeper smoke ring, then bump the temperature up later to power through the stall, like if you're doing a brisket or a pork butt, or to crisp up the skin if you're doing poultry. Okay. Let's see. Real Meat Stick says, yeah, there are pellet, let me make that bigger. There are pellet cookers which have the capability of using charcoal pellets mixed with wood pellets to burn simultaneously. Yeah, I think this is kind of like that new one, kind of like the newer thing that we're seeing. I haven't cooked on one of these personally, but I know that this is now becoming a more common function that you can get where they're using both. Um, well, actually, as I reread this, also um, Royal Oak, and I've used these before. Royal Oak has a charcoal flavored pellet, and I've used it, and it works really well. Yeah, and then what you do is mix it with like a cherry pellet. Yeah, mix it with a wood-based pellet to get kind of the best of both worlds. Then you're kind of getting the charcoal flavor from the charcoal pellets mixed in with the wood flavor. So that is another strategy. So yeah, I know Royal Oak makes charcoal pellets, and they're made from charcoal. I don't know if there are other brands that are doing the same, but I know Royal Oak is one, and you can get them at your local hardware store. Tim says the charcoal box is heavy duty. I take out the smoke tube and put in the charcoal box to finish off my cook while I turn the temperature up to 300 degrees. Wow, Tim is doing the thing, man. I mean, he is doing some innovative stuff to make sure that he's getting good flavor, good results with his barbecue. Tim, if you are not in the Backyard SmokeMaster Society, you need to come on in there and show us some pictures because I would love to see. It's at the bottom of the screen. The address has been scrolling throughout this show. Go to backyardsmokemaster.com/society and take you 30 seconds to sign up and get in. It's totally free. And it's just like this community that we've got going on in the podcast, except it's it's offline and we can jump in there whenever we want. So I'm personally inviting and hoping that you join the society and show us some of the pictures when you're doing, that type of cook. And he says that he usually cooks ribs and chicken. Okay. Noinks. Noinks is back. Good to see you again. He says, I don't have a pellet yet, so this info is timely. All right. I'm, always happy to assist and give you guys some information and some things to think about in your barbecue journey. And Chris says, my cousin just purchased the Weber Searwood. All right. I got an opportunity to assist him on a cook last weekend. It ran a lot smoother than I thought it would. Very well built at that price point. So there's someone with real firsthand experience using the Searwood, saying no issues, that it ran really smooth. So thank you for sharing that, Chris. Appreciate that. All right, some more fire management mistakes. So now we're talking about starting the grill with the lid closed. And this is also going to, it's gonna the it can be different depending on the manufacturer of your pellet grill. But in general, so pellets smolder and release combustible gases before fully igniting. So with the lid closed, trapped gases can release violently, and this is known as the pellet grill boom, warping lids and blowing them open. And I don't want to scare you guys, but this is kind of a worst case scenario. So again, this is model dependent. So again, this is important why you need to read your manual and be familiar, with the process, the startup process for your particular grill. So for example, Z Grills explicitly instructs you to start with the lid open, while Mac Grills explicitly instruct you to start with the lid closed. So that's what I do with my Mac 1-star and 2-star General. So again, the takeaway, don't assume what applies to one grill doesn't apply to all. All right, let me take a moment again to officially talk about tonight's episode. Our sponsor, and we've been talking about them a lot, is Smokin' Pecan. I personally have used this brand and I do highly endorse it. When I did a video, I reached out to them and asked if they would send me some of their pellets. They agreed. They sent me a box. I compared the Smokin' Pecan pellets to a bag of pellets that I got from Traeger. I just picked Traeger because, they're kind of like ubiquitous. You can go to pretty much any hardware store that sells any type of barbecue accessories, and they usually have Traeger's pellets. So I wanted to compare the two, and there's visible evidence in my video that the Smokin' Pecan pellets made from pecan shells were generating a lot of smoke versus the Traeger, and it was producing kind of like the typical amount of smoke. And this is, I'm talking about at the startup process, and this is at the very beginning. This is when the temperatures are the lowest. It's going to produce the most smoke. I mean, it was really, really obviously evident that the Smokin' Pecans were producing a lot more smoke. And then I found that it produced a lot less ash, and that has been consistent no matter what other brand of pellet I use. The Smokin' Pecan pellets don't produce as much ash. And again, they produce a better pecan smoke flavor. So if you have not yet ordered from them, take advantage of the opportunity to go to backyardsmokemaster.com/pecan. the address. You'll see it on the scroll at the bottom of the screen. Or you can just go to smokingpecan.com and then make sure you enter the code Backyard SmokeMaster when you check out, and you will save 10% off your very first order. So take advantage of that. And thanks again to Smoking Pecan for sponsoring this episode. Okay, before we jump into food and cooking mistakes, I like to try and keep up with the comments. I love how you guys have been really active in the comments. Okay. Real Meat Stick says a true pellet smoker I think he's saying a true pellet smoker maxes out at 350, right? Where a pellet grill will go up to 700 plus. So he's making the distinction between, a cooker that calls itself a pellet smoker versus one that calls itself a pellet grill. And a lot of times I think the terms are used interchangeably, but he's putting a definition on it. So if it's a true pellet grill, it should be able to get up to 700 degrees. Whereas if it can only get up to 350, then that should be considered a pellet smoker. And he says this is important to know when purchasing a pellet cooker based on your perceived usage. So yeah, I agree. I think it's very important if you have a particular use case in mind, like correctional officer was talking about wanting to use a pellet grill to do party wings, then again, I think you need to make sure, he was talking about the RecTech Bullseye, if I'm not mistaken. You need to make sure that you find out whether or not the RecTech Bullseye can get hot enough, up over 350. Can it get up to 400, 450? Can it get that hot? If it can, then I think it will meet your expectation. If it can only get up to 350, and it'll probably struggle to do that, then it may not be the pellet cooker for you. So I think that's a great tip. All right. Let's see. Oh, okay, Tim. Tim says, all right, well, Tim actually is a Backyard SmokeMaster Society member. All right, Tim. All right. Well, I appreciate that. Let's see some pictures, man. You gotta start posting. You gotta start posting. Don't just lurk. You got some good stuff going on there. So post. Please post. Can't wait to see your pictures. Definitely appreciate that. Okay. Let's see. All right. All right, correctional officers and enjoying the show. I guess he had to dip out. Wishing everyone a happy remainder of the weekend, too. Appreciate that. All right, let's keep it going because I got a few more for you guys. Lots of great information. I hope you're getting good value from this episode. All right, let's talk about it. Again, under the food and cooking mistakes category, this one I think is universal. Obsessing over temperature swings. Yes, this absolutely applies no matter what type of cooker you have. Don't obsess over temperature swings. But in the case of pellet grills usually display a single temperature reading, an average or fixed point reading. Now, third-party probes that you can get and put at the grate level are often going to show numbers that aren't going to match the display that you see on your pellet cooker. So don't panic. Many cooks panic and start chasing the temperature or chasing the controller temp up and down, and that can just make it worse. So on a pellet grill, swings within 15 to 30 degrees are normal behavior. The PID controller is basically sending the instructions, to the cooker, and it's trying to maintain essentially an average temperature. So it's going to naturally cool things off when it thinks it needs to be cooler, or it's going to, heat things up more intensely when it thinks things need to be hotter. So there's going to be some natural temperature swings. Again, do not obsess over that. Instead, focus on, again, overall average temperature, and where necessary, rotate your food to account for hot and cool zones. Mistake number 12, and I think this is universal, trusting the app, trusting what the app that you're using says instead of your own eyes. So apps show averages, they don't show the real world problems. So the app can't see the flameouts, the grease fires, or compromised pellets. The solution here: physical checks are mandatory, especially for expensive cuts of meat. If something looks off in the app, you're getting a cue, maybe a hint, go outside and look, and then decide for yourself whether or not you've got a problem or a situation that requires adjustment. Mistake number 11: trusting the factory meat probes that often come with your pellet cooker without verifying. So, factory installed probes often drift out of calibration by 10 to 20 degrees. So, relying on them alone can lead to overcooked, dry meat, or false doneness calls, or getting readings that give you a false report that your meat is done. Solution: always verify the internal temps that you're getting with a high quality handheld instant read thermometer. And if you watch the podcast, this is probably one of the tips that I say way more than anything else. You absolutely, absolutely should have at least one instant read thermometer by your side. That should be one of the first accessories you get for barbecue. You can get them, I don't care what brand you get, you can get one for 20 bucks. So there's no excuse. Make sure you have one at the ready. All right. Okay, let's see. Chris, thank you. Chris says, great show tonight. Looking forward to the next one. Really enjoyed your direct heat quick ribs video. I'm going to have to give that a try. I appreciate what you're doing. Keep them coming. Well, that's exactly what I'm going to try to do. I really want this year to be a great year for content, on my Backyard SmokeMaster barbecue channel. Definitely want to get more barbecue tutorial videos out like the one that I put out yesterday. So he's referring to a new cook where I did direct heat ribs on the smoke slinger in 90 minutes. So that was a lot of fun. Got a lot of good information. So check that one out after you're done watching the podcast. But I appreciate that from Chris. Tim says, smoking pecan is number one. That's what I use. And then Dan says, I think when talking about maybe mixing some pellets with charcoal pellets, maybe that's what he's responding to, but he says pecan or cherry. So I don't know if that's a question or if that's like, a preference. I think pecan or, it really comes down to your preference, really. But again, I guess I would add, so I've talked about this before too. Where possible, try to get pellets that are 100% authentic and only made from the type of wood that it says on the bag. Pecan, smoking pecan gives you the pecan shells. There are some other brands out there where if you buy the cherry pellets, they're gonna actually be cherry pellets. But then others are gonna, it might only be a percentage of cherry as a filler, where the rest of the pellet is made from something else. I know oak, alder tend to be really um, commonly used for all types of wood flavors. So again, look for those brands. Um, then I'm kind of blanking on the ones that I know are completely authentic. Um, there's one in particular that I really like, but I'm kind of blanking on the name. But anyway, yeah, make sure you do your diligence, and if you get the word that some brand is using a lot of filler, maybe try and stay stay away from that one. So that's kind of my thought on that. Real Meat Stick says, yeah, pellet grills work on averages, not instant responses. Yeah, you're not you increase the temperature from 250 to 275, it's not going to be instant, right? Cranking temps up and down causes overfeeding and flame instability. Make one adjustment and wait 10 to 15 minutes before touching anything. All right, more perfect sage advice from Real Meat Stick. Okay, Tim says, I don't know how to post pictures on YouTube, so I know how to do it on Instagram, but not YouTube. I will have to look into that. So I don't know, maybe you got a little confused. So the Backyard SmokeMaster Society is not on YouTube, it's not on Instagram. It's a totally separate online platform. Um, it's separate, so it's kind of like a barbecue group that is like a barbecue group that is on Facebook, except it's not on Facebook, right? So it's totally different and separate. So let me see if I can do this without losing my place. Okay, so we are on mistake number 11. And so this is what the Backyard SmokeMaster Society looks like. So if you go and use that sign up address that's at the bottom, scrolling at the bottom of the screen, backyardsmokemaster.com/society, sign up. That'll get you into this group. We currently have 65 members, and then you see, you can get in here and you can make a post like this one from Eric, who says that he just got a new ACG that came in, and here he's sharing a short video, and then he's also sharing a picture of it. So I think posting pictures and videos inside of the group is kind of like posting on Instagram or posting on Facebook. It's pretty much the same mechanism. So I would encourage you to go ahead and try that and do that. All right, bear with me. Let me get back to where we left off. Okay, we were talking about mistake number 1. Okay, here we go. All right, so we were talking about that, talked about the pellet boom. They all have their own mechanism to follow. Again, the key takeaway there: don't assume. Make sure on your whatever type of pellet grill you have, read the manual for the whether or not it'll tell you whether or not when you start up whether or not it needs to be open or closed. But that is very important that you start up the right way. All right. Why do I feel like that's why do I feel like I lost my place? Hold on. Actually, I think wait a minute. Okay. We were not there, right? We got totally thrown off. Actually, I think we were on number 10. Hold on. Let me get it together. Okay, here we go. Okay, so the next one, yeah, I think is number 10. Because we were talking about instant read thermometers, and I was saying, um, don't trust those factory meat probes. Instead, verify your internal temperatures with a high quality handheld instant read thermometer. All right, so let's move on to mistake number 10, trying to grill like it's a gas or charcoal grill. So most pellet grills with indirect heat, which is a heat diffuser, is going to block the direct flame. Standard grates also don't hold enough thermal mass to create a proper sear. So simply turning the temperature up on a pellet grill rarely produces a real sear and usually just ends up wasting pellets. And that kind of goes back to real meat sticks point, about, knowing what you're getting, whether or not your pellet cooker is really a smoker that only gets up to about 350 or a grill that can handle really hot temperatures. So, the solution, finish steaks on a gas or charcoal grill. I think somebody was suggesting this earlier. Um, use grill grates or a fully preheated cast iron surface. You can get that. You can get grill grates for for a lot of the popular pellet grills, and that will help you um, kind of bump up the temperature. That give you like a really hot cooking surface for your steaks, or we've all got a cast iron skillet, a preheated cast iron surface, or do a reverse sear with a hot finishing surface. Okay. All right. Mistake number 8. Don't overload the grate with too much cold food. Packing the grill full of cold proteins crashes the ambient temperature, triggers aggressive pellet feeding. Basically, your pellet cooker is going to think that it needs to do a lot. It needs to feed more pellets into that fire pot, and that often actually smothers the fire pot. So, try to leave at least 15% open space on your grates when you're adding cold meat to allow the hot air to circulate and ensure even cooking. All right, greetings to fellow YouTuber Carlton. Carlton's cooking. Now, if you're someone that cooks with a smoke slinger, Carlton has been making some great videos on his YouTube channel using the smoke slinger. I know he's also got one um, where he actually had Frank Cox come over to his place. How cool is that? And they did a whole hog. So he's got a video doing a whole hog with his full size smoke slinger. So Carlton, very glad to see you over here, and I'm hoping to see you even more. Always appreciate being able to connect with a fellow YouTuber, but definitely check out his channel. Okay. And all right, Dan says, I just joined the society. All right, appreciate that, Dan. Tim says, I heard so much about the pecan shell pellets. That's what made me start this little quest of using my kitchen range. Okay, that's pretty cool. So learning more about the pecan shell pellets from Smoking Pecan set Tim down an entirely different path. Um, and I bet the guys over at Smoking Pecan, they would be very pleased to hear that you're finding another cool way to use their pellets. That is outstanding. And Carlton says smoking pecan is the real deal. Yes, 100% pecan shells, no fillers. If anyone needs a coupon code, let me know. No, no, now you're doing too much. Now you're doing too much. I got a code. So if you're watching on my channel, use my code, Backyard SmokeMaster. Use my code. Let me get that off the screen. You're doing too much, Carlton. Wait a minute now. Okay. Uh, let's see. Let's see. All right, but glad, yeah, I'm definitely glad that you are here. Um, Appreciate that, and like I said, very very cool. Check out Carlton's channel, you guys. Okay, let's power through what we got left. So mistake number, I got a whole lot and didn't realize this was going to go this deep, but you guys got a lot of questions, a lot of comments, especially, and I love that energy. And like I said, that's what drives the show. Mistake number 4, only using a pellet grill for ribs and brisket. So this kind of gets into the thought that a pellet grill is only good for low and slow cooking. And like Real Meat Stick mentioned, if your pellet grill can get way hotter than that, it can do more. So pellet grills are designed to handle far more than long smokes. Their real strength is steady, oven-like temperature control with a light smoke profile. And other great uses for them is baking bread, roasting chicken or veggies, cooking pizzas on a stone, rotisserie cooking, cold smoking cheese, butter, or fish. There's just a whole lot of outstanding things that you can do with a pellet cooker. So if you're just thinking that it's only good for doing long cooks, this leads to the false belief that pellet grills are slow, expensive to run, or impractical for everyday cooking. And actually, this is why I think, if you're gonna have multiple cookers, I think everyone should get experience cooking on a charcoal-based cooker. Learn how to cook with charcoal, learn fire management. But then once you kind of get that under your belt, sometimes you're going to find these situations where you need a second cooker to do some of the other stuff. Maybe it's veggies or it's another protein, something else that's kind of like doesn't require as much hand holding as maybe some of the other cookers. This is exactly where I think a pellet grill, having one in your arsenal, so to speak, is a great thing. So, again, use your pellet cooker as a versatile outdoor oven for a wide range of meats. All right, let's see. We got Real Meat Stick says pellet grills are automated fireboxes, not magic ovens. Treat the fire pot, airflow, and fuel with respect, and they're absolute workhorses. That is spot on. Spot on. Absolutely. Real Meat Stick always has a way of putting it very succinctly and direct, um, boiling it all down to the takeaway. So I really, really appreciate that. All right. So this is the last bucket of mistakes. So the last bucket is maintenance and placement mistakes. And so basically what we're talking about is prevention and placement keep you cooking. So, mistake number 24, placing that grill too close to the house or under an overhang. So, pellet grills rely on clean airflow throughout the exhaust to regulate temperature. So, low eaves, pergolas, or wall traps or walls trap smoke and heat, reflecting it back toward the lid. This can interfere with the exhaust flow, causing unstable temperatures, poor combustion, and bitter smoke flavors. Also, it can create unnecessary fire risk from heat buildup and grease vapor. So the solution is to make sure you position your pellet cooker with clear space above and behind the exhaust. And again, follow the manufacturer's clearance guidelines. All right, mistake number 22 is forgetting to manage the grease bucket between cooks. So this is easy to overlook. The grease bucket is easy to ignore because it hangs outside the grill. During long cooks, rendered fat adds up quickly. An already half full bucket, next thing you know, you'll find it overflowing. Full grease buckets left hanging can attract animals, rodents, can get knocked off by the pets, kids, or the wind. So, the easy solution: empty the grease bucket before long cooks and remove it when the grill is not in use. Now, here's another important one. Number 21, depending on where you are, leaving pellets sitting in humid weather. Pellets absorb moisture from the air even when the grill is covered. So that's when if you're leaving the pellets inside the hopper in between cooks, you need to be cognizant of this. So in humid conditions, they swell, they soften, they crumble inside the auger tube, and that leads to poor combustion, flame outs, auger jams that are going to require often a full tear down. So the solution: use the hopper clean out feature, empty the pellets into a sealable storage bin, like I showed you guys earlier, and do that. Try and do that after every cook, and that will definitely keep you from running into some problems in case, especially if you're in an area where it gets really humid. And I think it's just a good practice, like form like a muscle memory and do it every time, and that'll help you prevent that one. Number 9, blocking airflow with tightly tucked foil. And this is something that I was very guilty of when I first started cooking with my Mac 1 Star General. Because what I like to do, I was thinking I need to keep this thing clean and pristine, so I'm gonna wrap the drip tray in foil. So wrapping the drip tray with foil, it can make your cleanup easier, but it can actually block the grease drain or the side channels. Restricting airflow can cause erratic fires and lead to frequent flameouts. So you want to make sure, if you are going to foil that drip tray, you're going to make sure that it doesn't interfere with the grill's designed air paths. All right, so that is key. So I've gotten over that, trying to keep my drip tray pristine. It's an outdoor cooker, so it's built to get messy. Just clean it up every now and then. All right, number 5, switching to high heat after multiple low and slow cooks without cleaning. So grease builds up gradually during low and slow cooks, often over several sessions. When you run the grill hot, that old grease liquefies all at once, and it can ignite during the heat ramp up. And this often catches people off guard because it has nothing to do with what's currently on the grill. So the solution: scrape the drip tray and clear built up grease before any high heat cook, especially after several long smokes. All right, we're powering through. Number 5, cooking on a new grill without a burn off. This is actually universal. No matter what type of grill you have, you want to do a burn off. So, manufacturing oils and residues coat new grills to prevent rust during shipping. Cooking during the initial burn off locks those smells and chemicals into your food. Nobody wants that. So the solution is to always a first burn, do a first burn at high heat for at least 45 minutes, and hopefully, the manual or the company that you bought your pellet grill from is providing their own specific recommendations for doing the burn off. So very, very important. All right, you guys. So we have gone through a whole lot. I hope you got a lot of great information. So, three of the most costly mistakes, again, starting with the lid closed without checking your manual. Make sure whether or not your manual says to have it open or closed. Setting the temperature, we talked a lot about this. Starting off your cook too high, too early, ultimately is going to rob your meat of smoke flavor. So utilize that smoke function on your pellet grill so that your meat can take in smoke flavors between, like 160, 180. Get all that smoke flavor in before exposing to meat to hotter temperatures, and switching to high heat after multiple low and slow cooks without cleaning. So, and that's kind of one of the things I would say if you have a pellet grill, maybe even more so than you do with your other cookers, although I try to make this a practice on all of my cookers, is, you know, give it a nice clean out after every, you know, 2 or 3 cooks, 3 cooks tops, maybe, two. Make it a good practice. Form that muscle memory to try and keep, the inside of your grill clean. Take it a step further. Make sure you're cleaning your grill grates, um, I've got videos talking about different ways to do that, like using an onion on a warm grill grate. That's a good way to keep your grate seasoned. You don't have to go wild and crazy while your grill is hot. Nice, cheap, easy thing to do. Take some aluminum foil, ball it up, scrape it across the grates, knock off some of that residue, leftover grease, that baked in, caked in grease, get that off of the grates so that it doesn't end up on the next food that you end up cooking. All right, so lots of great information. All right, again, we've been talking about this. Again, if you haven't already done it, there's a QR code. Join the Backyard SmokeMaster Society. Like I said, it's like those barbecue groups that are on Facebook, but it's without all the distraction. It's without all the, you're getting the notifications and, all the crazy stuff that's going on, it's just strictly 100% barbecue. We share photos, we share tips, we share video clips, we ask questions. If I don't have the answer, hopefully somebody else that's in the community does. That's what it's all about. Free to join. Take you about 30 seconds and you're in. So I hope if you aren't already part of the society, I hope you do take a moment to jump on in. All right. Next week is going to be a big special show. I'm hoping to try and make it special. It's going to be the 100th episode of the podcast. So we are here every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Pacific time. So next week's show will be on February the 18th. And I hope that you are there with me. Again, appreciate all of the activity, the comments in the chat, all of the great information that you guys bring, the great questions. Again, I wouldn't have been able to reach 100 episodes without your support, your energy, your connection, your community. So that's what this is all about. And I do appreciate all of you. All right, you guys. So this is Kenyatta Robinson signing off. Take care, get out there and smoke something, and I will see you next week.